Welcome to part two. Let's start with the principal kinds of quasi contract. To begin, what is negotiorum gestio? Negotiorum gestio is a type of quasi contract where a person voluntarily takes charge of managing another person's property or affairs without their prior consent or authority. The gestor, or the person managing, acts in good faith to benefit the owner and is entitled to reimbursement for necessary expenses. For instance, if Juliet leaves her farm unattended during her vacation and Romeo, her neighbor, waters the plants and takes care of the farm to prevent loss, Romeo can claim reimbursement for the expenses incurred. Solutio in debiti is the obligation to return money or something that was mistakenly paid or delivered when there was no right to demand it. It occurs when A. Something is received, there is no right to demand it, and it was delivered by mistake. For example, Mr. A, acting as assistant of Mr. B, receives 5,000 pesos meant for paying Mr. B's labor. Since Mr. A is not entitled to keep the money, he is obligated to give it to Mr. B. This prevents unjust enrichment by ensuring mistaken payments are returned. Article 1161, civil obligations arising from criminal offenses shall be governed by the penal law subject to the provisions of Article 2177 and of the pertinent provisions of Chapter 2, preliminary title of on human relations and title uh, 18 of the book, regulating damages. Civil liability arising from the commission of a crime in the Philippine legal context includes three main components. Number one, restitution. Restitution is the return or restoration of the thing taken or affected by the crime to its original state or owner whenever possible. Number two, reparation of damage caused. Compensation for the actual loss or injury resulting directly from the criminal act, such as damages to property or physical injuries. 3. Indemnification of consequential damages. Compensation for additional damages caused as a consequence of the crime, which may also include moral damages, loss of income, or injury to family members. These liabilities ensure that the offender not only faces criminal penalties, but also compensates the victim for all harms caused by the offense. Example, Magna stole the bike of Suma. If Magna is convicted, the court will order Magna to return the bike, to pay for the damage, and to pay such other damages suffered by Suma as a consequence of the crime. Article 1162, obligations derived from quasi-delicts shall be governed by the provisions of Chapter 2, Title 17 of the book, and by specified laws. Quasi-delicts in Philippine law refers to civil liabilities arising from damages caused to another through fault or negligence without any pre-existing contractual relationship between the parties. According to Article 2176 of the Civil Code, when a person causes harm or damage to another by any act or omission accompanied by negligence or fault, they are obliged to pay for the damage done. This is different from contractual liability as it arises independently of any contract. So, to summarize quasi delicts, there must be an act or omission, there must be fault or negligence, damage must result from the act or omission, and there's no prior contract between the parties exist. So this principle holds people accountable for harm caused unintentionally, emphasizing the duty of care in social relations. Quasi delicts is extinguish of obligations and contracts. Article 1231 of the Philippine Civil Code states that obligations are extinguished by the following principal means. Number one, payment or performance, fulfilling the obligation as agreed either by paying money or performing the required act. Number two, loss of the thing due. When the specific thing needed for the obligation is destroyed or lost without fault. Number three, condonation or remission of the debt. When the creditor forgives or cancels the debtor's obligation to pay. Number four, confusion or merger. When the roles of creditor and debtor merge in the same person, extinguishing the obligation. Compensation. When two parties owe each other debts, this can be offset, extinguishing the obligations to the extent of the lower debt. Novation. When the obligation is replaced by a new one, extinguishing the old obligation. Other causes like annulment, rescission, and prescription are covered elsewhere in the Civil Code. To summarize, once these conditions are met, the obliger is no longer required to fulfill the obligation. Article 1232 of the Philippine Civil Code explains that payment means not only the delivery of money, but also the performance of the obligation in any other manner. The concept of payment is the fulfillment or consummation of what is owed or prestation, which leads to the extinguishment of the obligation. For example, if a person is obliged or obligated to give a specific car, payment is made by delivering that car. Similarly, if the obligation is to perform a service, payment is the actual performance of that service. Payment can also involve refraining from doing something depending on the nature of the obligation. Thus, payment encompasses all ways of fulfilling an obligation, not just monetary payment. Article 1233. A debt shall not be understood to have been paid unless the thing or service in which the obligation consists has been completely delivered or rendered as the case may be. Act 1277. Confusion, Article 1277. Confusion does not extinguish a joint obligation except as regards the share corresponding to the creditor or debtor in whom the two characters concur. Article 1305, contract is a meeting of the minds. This is just a summary. Article 1306, Article 1308, Article 1309, Article 1311, Article 1313. Article 1314 states that any third person who induces another to violate his contract shall be liable for damages to the contracting party. So this means if a person knowingly persuades someone to break a valid contract, they can be held responsible for the harm caused to the innocent party. However, the contract itself cannot be validated if both original parties do not agree. Article 1317 emphasizes that no one may enter into a contract on behalf of another without authorization or legal right to represent that person. Any contract made without such authority is invalid unless ratified by the person represented. So these articles protect contractual relationships from unlawful interference and unauthorized actions by third parties. Chapter 2, Essential Requisites of Contracts, Article 1318 to 1355. Article 1318 of the Civil Code states that a contract cannot exist unless three essential requisites are present: consent of the contracting parties, there must be a mutual agreement or meeting of the minds, object certain, the subject matter of the contract must be definite and clearly identified, and the cause of the obligation. The reason or purpose that establishes the obligation must be lawful and certain. So, without these three elements, the contract is considered invalid and unenforceable. Article 1319 of the Civil Code states that consent is manifested by the meeting of the offer and acceptance upon the thing and the costs which are to constitute the contract. So this means that for consent to be valid, there must be a clear and definite offer by one party and an absolute acceptance by the other party, both agreeing on the subject matter and the reason are the cause of the contract. So the offer must be certain and the acceptance must be unconditional. Otherwise, a qualified acceptance is considered a counteroffer which rejects the original offer. Consent can be expressed or implied and must be freely given by the parties involved for the contract to be valid. So, in short, consent is the mutual agreement of minds of the essential aspects of the contract forming the basis for a binding agreement. Article 1320 states or expresses that an acceptance may be expressed or implied. An express acceptance is clearly and explicitly stated, either orally or in writing. For example, when you say, I accept your offer, is an express acceptance. Implied acceptance is inferred from the conduct or actions of the person, even if it's not spoken or written. For example, if someone accepts services and uses them without objection, this conduct implies acceptance. So both forms create a binding agreement once the acceptance meets the terms of the offer. Article 1321 states that the person making the offer has the right to fix the time, place, and manner in which the offer must be accepted. The offeree must comply with these conditions for the acceptance to be valid. For example, if the offerer gives a deadline to accept the offer or specifies that acceptance should be done in writing or in person at a certain location, the offeree must follow these requirements. Failure to do so may render the acceptance ineffective or treated as a new offer. So the terms set by the offerer regarding when, where, and how acceptance must be communicated are binding on the parties. Article 1323 of the Civil Code states that an offer becomes ineffective if either party dies, is declared civilly interdicted, becomes insane, or insolvent before the acceptance is communicated. This means that the contract offer can no longer be accepted or validated if any of these conditions happen before acceptance takes place. So the legal capacity or existence of either party must be intact for the offer to remain valid. Article 1324 states that when the offeror has allowed the offeree a certain period to accept an offer, the offer may still be withdrawn at any time before acceptance by communicating such withdrawal. However, the withdrawal is not allowed if the option is founded upon a consideration, meaning something of value like money or promise has been paid or given to keep the offer still open. In short, if no consideration supports the option, the offerer can revoke the offer anytime before the acceptance. But if there is consideration, the offer becomes binding for the agreed period. Article 1325 states that businesses or business advertisements of things for sale are generally not considered definite offers, but are merely invitations to potential buyers to make an offer. This means advertisements invite customers to propose a purchase which the advertiser can accept or reject. However, if the advertisement contains all the necessary details to form a complete and definite offer, such as price, quantity, and terms, it may be treated as an offer that binds an advertisement upon acceptance. So, most ads are invitations to negotiate rather than binding offers unless explicitly stated otherwise. Article 1349 of the Civil Code states that the object of every contract must be determinate as to its kind or nature. However, the exact quantity of the object does not have to be specified at the time the contract is made, as long as it can be determined later without needing a new contract between the parties. In other words, as long as the type or kind of the object is clear, the contract is valid even if the exact amount is initially uncertain, provided this quantity can be determined from the contract or by legal means without creating a new agreement. These are the short explanation for these three articles. Article 1350, in onerous contracts, the cause is the prestation or promise by one party in exchange for the other's prestation. In remunerative contracts, the cause is the service or benefit rewarded. In contracts of pure beneficence, the cause is the liberality or generosity of the giver. Article 1352, contracts without a cause or with an unlawful cause have no legal effect at all. A cause is unlawful if it is contrary to law, morals, good customs, public order, or public policy. And lastly for today, Article 1353, stating a false cause in a contract renders it void unless it is proven that the contract was founded upon another true and lawful cause. These articles emphasize that the cause or reason behind a contract must be lawful and genuine for the contract to be valid and enforceable. That is for the first part to introduce the law, obligations, and contract. This is part two, and I'll see you in the next. Goodbye for now.